weekend about him. And some of you may know that he's called Malcolm X because a lot of the Black people don't actually know really what their original ancestral name was, because when they were taken and enslaved, a lot of times their name didn't stay with them. And so Malcolm X specifically changed his name to X because of that reason, because he doesn't really know. But when he was born, he was not called Malcolm X. He was called Malcolm Little, because that was his father's name, which most likely came from whoever had enslaved his family way back then. So this is a beautiful, beautiful book. It's written by Ilyasah Shabazz, who is the daughter of Malcolm X, called Malcolm X, the boy who grew up to become Malcolm Little, the boy who grew up to become Malcolm X. And it's illustrated by A.G. Ford. And Miss Afif actually lent me this book, and she loves it, and I can see why she loves it. But it's such a beautiful book. It has so many lessons, but we really actually can't read all of the book because it's quite long. And so I'm just going to read certain parts of it to you, inshallah. So Malcolm X's parents were named Earl and Louise, and they lived in the Midwest in Omaha, Nebraska. They had a home and a small piece of land, and there were 7 children. So Malcolm had 6 brothers and sisters. Okay, I'm going to do my best to kind of show you the pictures and read as I go. All right. The little children were happy and romped and tromped endlessly around the little home and the land in Omaha, Nebraska. Malcolm was the middle child, and while Malcolm was different, he was full of questions, a natural leader, and a fun-loving prankster. And along with his brothers and sisters, he was always up to something. But when Malcolm was 4 years old, something horrifying happened that he would never forget. One night, when the little family was sound asleep, and the percussive hiss of the cricket song whistled quietly in the darkness, the loud crackle of a blazing fire awakened them. Terror clutched Malcolm's heart as he realized the blaze was consuming their home. Fortunately, Malcolm and his family escaped the raging inferno, but they watched in disbelief as their beloved home burned to the ground. They would later learn that the flames had been set by townspeople who disagreed with their family's beliefs about universal equality and justice. The fire was a sad sign of ignorance and intolerance. But nothing would stop Earl and Louise Little from moving forward. Despite the great loss of their house and all their belongings, they vowed to rebuild their lives, armed not with material possessions, but instead with optimism and faith. After all, Earl and Louise knew that possessions come and go, but faith, love, and perseverance would sustain them. Earl purchased 6 acres of land in Lansing, Michigan, and set out to build a new home for his family. He would construct it with his own hands, from the ground up. Earl built the house nail by nail and brick by brick, only buying a new piece of hardware when he had enough money to pay for it. Papa, Malcolm asked, "How come we don't have any windows in our house?" Earl answered with total confidence, "Son, when we can afford the glass, our frames will be filled." He leaned over to look squarely into Malcolm's eyes. All good things begin with a fundamental structure. From that moment on, whenever Malcolm felt the wind blow through those empty window frames, instead of wondering when the glass would come, he would think of his father's unstoppable optimism and faith. Malcolm's father would preach about faith, self-reliance, and hard work to throngs of people gathered at local churches and assemblies. The grown-ups in the audience listened intently, their eyes fixed on Earl, their ears on his words, and their souls on his message. Malcolm felt the electricity in the room as the dignity and self-respect of those in attendance would steadily rise. The meetings were charged with the group's collective desire to create their own opportunities and lead better lives. Malcolm's father reminded them that they were not merely the descendants of slaves, but that their African ancestors built some of the greatest civilizations ever recorded in history, and that they too could stand together to build a bright future for their children. These were lessons in hope and self-determination that Malcolm would grow to love. And just as Malcolm found inspiration from his father's speeches at church, he learned some unexpected lessons from his mother's garden at home. For Malcolm, the enchanted garden of Louise Norton Little was an entire world of its own, where even the most sluggish of ladybugs and the fastest scurrying ants were all equally treated like esteemed and welcome guests at a family Sunday brunch. Here, Louise taught her children to love every living creature equally, large or small, pretty or ugly, busy or still, fast or slow, insect or plant. The garden was a testament to true and unconditional brotherhood from the earth on up to the sky, a daily lesson in acceptance and equality. Each living creature had a story, a purpose, a reason for being, and a beauty of its own. Through the majestic trees in the garden, Malcolm would also learn about the importance of roots, nature's anchors, the base of every living creature. And through the outspread wings of the chirping birds above, he began to see the power of possibility. One summer day, as Malcolm tended to his lot in the garden, out of nowhere, a small flurry of color swept right through the air. As he stood up to wipe the August sweat from his forehead, Malcolm saw the colossal insect. It was every color of the rainbow, and it flew right by his cheek, as if to give him the tiniest kiss. Malcolm had never seen anything so pretty, its paper-thin wings forever winking at the world, its vibrant colors, each one more beautiful than the next. "Do you see the beautiful butterfly, Malcolm?" Louise asked her son. Well, believe it or not, there was a time when that butterfly thought of itself as ugly, frightened, and all alone. It did not understand the value of its own little life. It had to learn about patience because it had no idea what the future would hold. It had to develop and mature and blossom. And now look at it. It's beautiful, proud, smart, and free. Sorry, I have to just skip a couple pages here. All right. But the innocent world of magical gardens and carefree fishing would be short-lived, and Malcolm's life would change forever. The young boy, who until now had learned so much from his parents, lost his father Earl to the brute force of racism and the narrow-mindedness of the Ku Klux Klan members and their brethren in the Black Legion. They disagreed with Earl and Louise's beliefs in equality, and apparently they also disagreed with Earl's right to live in a free society. In fact, they did not seem to think he had the right to live at all. And it quickly became clear that the hate and fury that was behind the fire that burned down the little house many years ago was now back again. Only this time, the hate was so strong, it took Earl Little away from his family forever. He was killed by the KKK. And after that, his mother also became sick and she couldn't take care of the children. So Malcolm and all his brothers and sisters were separated out and they had to go live in different places. And you can imagine Malcolm was very sad and he started to kind of struggle in school, but then something happened. On one overcast morning, Malcolm stood up from his desk chair at school and walked over to the open window, which was inviting a soft breeze into his desk at home, which was inviting a soft breeze into his room. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. And when he opened his eyes again, he saw something he would never forget. Hanging delicately from a small twig on a great giant evergreen tree was a cocoon, something Louise had shown him one day in the garden. "You see that peculiar little thing, Malcolm? Well, it's actually a casing spun of silk, a protective covering for the creature that lives inside until it's mature enough to fly out into the world." The soaring butterfly, so the butterfly came out. The soaring butterfly gently opened Malcolm's heart to feel joy again. Standing there on his own 2 feet, he felt his roots reaching down into the earth, gripping the soil and providing the strength he needed to awaken the dormant parts of his identity. He would use the sharpness of his mind to overcome the heaviness of his heart. He would replace sadness with smarts and hardship with hard work at school. And just like the butterfly, Malcolm was ready to soar. So he did go through quite a lot more struggles in his life, but as we will learn more about him, he became very important, very influential. He accepted Islam later, actually several years after his childhood, and a lot of lessons that we can learn from his life. So I wish I could have read you the whole book, but it's too long, and it would have been taking up too much of our time and a lot of time.
No, Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Miss Anne, for reading part of the book for us, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll definitely be learning more about our Imam, Malcolm X, bidnillahi ta'ala, over the course of the month. And of course, this Saturday, inshallah, for our event with Brother Salahuddin, who we're really excited to have come and talk to us about Malcolm X's life, inshallah. All